2, 1.
Roll red, upright track red.
Turns and shoots. He scores!
Take back silver. Take back feed.
Mike check 4. Number 2 RL.
Three, take 3.
Ready,
Number 4,
A.
stay with the defender. 30 blue.
Ready, A,
Ready
Dan.
4.
Way back, turn the ball out the ball. That ball is out of here. Oh, sucker!
Have a good one, everybody.
Shooting to Score is brought to you by Hall Pass Media and Hall Pass Studios. Hall Pass Media is a full-service marketing agency that specializes in brand consulting, event management, digital marketing, and creative design. Hall Pass Media has a wide range of clients and partners that include the NBA Summer League, the NBA Coaches Association, and the basketball tournament. For more information, please visit hallpassnetwork.com. This episode is also brought to you by Sports Business Classroom, an immersive sports business training and educational experience unlike any other. Registration for this program is now open. The experience is a one-of-a-kind learning opportunity for anyone interested in the sports industry, specifically the business of basketball. For media professionals, this is a unique opportunity to enhance your sports business intellect and network with some of the brightest minds in the field. If you dream of one day landing a job in sports or wish to advance in your career, this program will allow you to show the right people that you have what it takes. Sports Business Classroom combines the best of all worlds into a single package. It's great academics, it's hands-on experience, and immersion at the Las Vegas Summer League. You can check out all the details for the 2020 program at sportsbusinessclassroom.com. And if you're at all interested, make sure to apply as soon as possible as this program will fill up. Again, the URL is www.sportsbusinessclassroom.com. Hey sports creatives, welcome to the show. Today's guest is the incredibly hardworking and tenacious on-air talent personality, Camryn Irwin. Camryn is a former professional volleyball player who now tours with AVP Beach Volleyball as one of their broadcast hosts for their professional events. There's absolutely no doubt that Camryn has made it to where she is today because of her drive. There aren't many people out there working harder than this Pacific Northwest farm girl. From basketball to robotics, she has become an expert in every event that she covers. In our conversation today, we looked at what goes into preparing for all the different events and types of productions she's worked. I also picked her brain about what crews can do to help talent such as herself excel in their roles. For anyone aspiring to be on camera one day, this episode lays out example after example for how to succeed in the field. And if you're like me and are more likely to be in the production truck, I was sure to pull out some helpful tips for us as well. Enjoy my conversation with the talented Camryn Irwin. Well, sweet. Thanks for coming in today, Camryn. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Awesome.
Super fun to be back with Hall Pass.
Yeah, always love having you in here. Want to get started, just getting a little bit of your backstory and find out as a on-air sports personality where your enthusiasm for sports came from.
Ooh, that's a good question. So let's see. I am the youngest of 4. All of my siblings were super competitive, super athletic, and that's just my entire childhood revolved around one sporting event to the next. And I have 2 older sisters that played volleyball. So volleyball kind of was where I first found my first sporting love. I played basketball, I played tennis, I played golf, I played soccer growing up. My brother did water skiing and snow skiing. I mean, everything that you can imagine in our household became a competition. Even ping pong. We were highly competitive at ping pong. And so from a very young age, I fell in love with challenging myself to become the best version of myself. And a lot of that came in the form of sports, competition, any reason I could to try and kind of prove myself. And I think I always had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder being the youngest of 4 of like, I got to defend myself. I mean, my siblings are fantastic, but I got to protect myself a little bit. There was a lot of, fun and jarring and, it always bordered the harassment level as well. And so I just fell in love with the environment that takes place in a sporting environment. And so I was luckily afforded the chance to get to go play college volleyball and then play professional indoor volleyball. And through all of, what would it be, 18 years, I kind of figured out that I love sports and I love the stories in sports. And so more than anything, it wasn't, I fell in love with the competition, all that. It was, I fell in love with the people I got to interact with, my teammates. I loved leadership. I loved leading my teams. Learning to also follow was a big aspect of that as well. And so because I fell in love with all of those stories, I was like, well, I want to share these stories. These shaped who I am as a person. My character is solely based on qualities I learned, from my family. And then in these gnarly competitive environments with a common goal in mind. And so I was like, well, how do you combine all those passions into one thing? Do you want to do for the rest of your life? And I was like, I'm just going to tell these stories. And that happens in sports broadcasting. So that's kind of the long, short answer of why sports and why sports broadcasting is, because I love it all.
Mm-hmm. So talk about some of your sports background. Some of you tried, looked like you played a lot of different things growing up. What were some of the sports that you participated in? Is it?
So I did, So started off basketball when I was younger. Lots of volleyballs from the time I was about 5 years old, I started. So thank you, Connie and Cassie, because they got me started really young. So from about 5 to 6 years old, every single weekend, I was in the gym either playing or watching them play. It's so funny. Even now, we have friends that watched my sisters and myself play, and the comments I always got were, you just move so much like your sisters, or like you even play, you see the game the same way. And so I think there's this huge growth that can take place from just like immersing yourself in something and watching for years, which is still something I take into my analysis of any sport I'm covering, is just watch and absorb as much as you possibly can. So I did volleyball and then golf and tennis prior to going to the University of Oregon. I played tennis for 3 years in high school, and it was kind of hard on my body. So I switched to golf my last year and found another new passion there. And then, went to the University of Oregon, played 1 season there, ended up transferring to Washington State and finished out my collegiate experience as a Coug.
Right on. So what are some things you think you took from the individual sports versus the team sports?
That is a great question. Let's just say I'm very glad I played both tennis and golf, because as much as I learned to lead in team sports, I didn't have an opportunity. I was never able to look inward and say like, well, what's your mentality like? Because you're so outwardly focused on everyone else that's around you. My sole job was to make sure, their psyche is correct. How can I make sure my outside hitter just made 3 errors? Do I feed them the ball? Where's their head out? How can I manage every single emotion that's happening on the court? Because it's such a huge aspect of sports in general. So then all of a sudden you switch and you go to golf and tennis, and there's nobody but you to blame. So you're sitting there, and it makes you take a really deep, hard look at yourself, your mentality. And I learned a lot about myself. I already knew I was really competitive, but I learned I'm a hothead. Like when I play, I am fiery. I want to throw my racket when I make a mistake. Luckily, my mother would have taken me off the court if I ever did that. So I learned to manage my emotions better. Okay. Whereas in indoor or any team sport, I was just so outwardly focused. I didn't really realize what was happening internally with myself. And I think, you live so much of your life outside of the competitive stage of, the sporting environment, that a lot of those lessons from tennis and golf, that's a lot of what I have to deal with on a daily basis now as a broadcaster. Like I have a solo performance. I have to look back, watch the film, know I'm making errors at different places. And then how do you respond to those errors? Knowing they're only yours. No one else is to blame. I mean, yes, you do have a team behind you, but it's not the producer's fault. It's not the director's fault. It's on you, because you can be as prepared as possible and still make errors, but you just have to keep practicing and being okay with making errors. It will happen. So, I think the individual sports definitely challenge you. And I hope our youth are not just getting stuck in one sport. And like, there's so many good things to learn from all of them.
No, I completely agree.
Yeah.
So how did Camryn Irwin become a sports television or sports on-air media personality?
Years of work, and a lot of, doubts, fears. There's a lot of that in this industry. So I started, my sophomore year of college, when I transferred to Washington State, I started just writing for the local newspaper, the school newspaper, writing stories that most of them involve sport, but they were on conversations of concussions or mental health, kind of the stories that get left out or the feature pieces that were really important to my heart. So multi-sport athletes in rural communities was one of my big stories I remember I first wrote. And then I knew I just needed to keep becoming a better journalist. So I was still playing full-time at Washington State. I approached the athletic department and said, I have interest in becoming a broadcast journalist. What can I do? How can I help? And so for 3 years, they actually hired me pretty much to start producing, editing, shooting, writing content. And one of my next pieces was I had to write the senior game day bios for like our programs for our football team. And I remember I had like 300 words for, a page. That's about it, to tell one of our seniors' stories. And that's went out. And I had a byline, and it was a huge deal to me. And I spent hours on 300 words, hours and hours, trying to figure out how can I seamlessly tie in like this whole person's story in just a handful of words. And that was a big step for me. Then it just kind of continued to kind of progress beyond that. I went and played professionally overseas, came back, and I started calling games for like our webcast, our web stream. And I was calling games of my former teammates, which was hilarious. Then I went back overseas one more year, came back, and I called Pac-12 and said, I'm ready to get this done. And so the whole time, it was about 4 years I had 4-ish years of work experience before I ever got to a network. And it was just like grinding it out, in college, going and, spending 7 hours a day, whether it's practice, you're in the gym, you're doing the weightlifting, then you have your studies, and then I'd start writing. So, I was on 4 or 5 hours less of sleep a night. It was a different kind of environment, but I'm very grateful I put myself through through that, because it ended up helping me in the long run. And then, just one thing led to another. Now it's, football and basketball and continuing to challenge myself with every step. So, I just called a robotics competition for the first time. I never thought I'd be calling a robotics competition, but I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the stories. And so I'm always just kind of looking to expand beyond my small volleyball world of, what I grew up in. And now I just want to keep telling stories.
That's awesome. It sounds like you took that, once you stopped playing the sports, you took those 7-8 hours a day that you had working out and practicing and stuff, and just, putting that all towards your career. From my experience working with you, it just seems like you don't turn off. It's 12 to 15 hours a day of just focusing on what you have to get done and getting, doing what it takes to do that.
And it's people look at my life from the outside, and I think you get it because you're in sports and you're in sports production. If you're in this world, you know what it takes to be in this world. And there are a lot of sacrifices that go hand in hand with being a part of this. But I freaking love my job. Like, I love what I do. So when people look at me and they're like, well, you like, who are your people? Like, you're not going out and, going wild on a Friday and Saturday night. And I'm like, no, but that's because I'm studying to be able to tell this kid's story to hopefully shape somebody else's life. Like, that's what gets my motor going. And I think for a lot of people in this industry, we fall so in love with the people we work with and their stories. And we think we know how incredible some of these people are. And it's almost like a responsibility or a duty to work that hard. Like, it is my sole mission to make sure your story comes across as best as possible to other people. So hopefully it can shift and change their life. So when I look at it like that, like I have this thing that's always, kind of bearing down on me. There's nothing else I'd rather be doing. It's amazing. Like, I love it. From
knowing your story a little bit more and working with you, I see the correspondence from the work ethic and the drive that it takes to become a professional athlete, because you did play professionally. And that's not something that just anybody goes out and does. That takes a lot of hard work and sacrifice and practice. And you've, just naturally transitioned that into your career. Whether it's from your parents, family, whatever, where did that drive come from?
I have this conversation with my family all the time. So I mentioned I'm the youngest of 4. I've got a sister that's a dentist, and her husband is as well. She's this amazing, like, perfectionist that just drives so hard, so intellectual, very social. People relate so easily to her. She's like this beautiful being. And then my next sister is the same thing. She's a first grade teacher, and to see her interact and work with kids and lead people, and then my brother, on the other hand, is like this big bear that like has protected me my entire life, always taking care of his 3 sisters, incredible businessman, works in real estate, just with this undeniable drive to succeed. And all 3 of them have that. And now all of them have that. And that's what I grew up looking to, along with my parents, which, that's a longer story. There's been some things that have happened in my life and in my family's life that has made us struggle in certain areas. And so I'm used to watching my dad wake up at 5 a.m. and like putting pennies out at different times of my childhood just to make sure like his kids could eat. And so you're sitting there watching this and you're like, then he's staying up till midnight and then doing the same thing. And whether it was hard labor, like blue collar worker, which he did a lot, and even later on in his life to provide for his family. And my mom's the same way. Like they never stop. Every weekend it's now the realtors, you know, how can we better serve our clients? They don't stop until the job is done. And it's not just done, it's done well and it's done right. And they know that people have been treated in the right way. So when I look at my family life, like I can't not approach my life in the same way. Because I feel like I would be how do I say this? Like I have these amazing examples that I kind of have to live up to. And what right do I have to sit back on my laurels when I have all these amazing people doing these amazing things? It's like, no, my family put this out there and I'm very grateful. Now there are some challenges with that. None of us stop, none of us relax. we are all trying to learn to take a step back and kind of just slow down. And a lot of us have been in the position now, okay, take 2 days. Like there is something called a weekend for a reason. We need to work on that. But yeah, it all stems from them. And knowing in our brains, it's funny, we like see our sibling or our, you know, for them or their spouse or our parents. And I'm like, they're still working and it's 11 o'clock at night. What right do I have to not be working?
You know? I mean, the competitive nature within you guys too.
Yeah. And it's not necessarily even now, it's more so of like this, I know this is getting really personal, but it's like this, like kind of this guilt of like, I'm not doing enough. I need to do more. And it's just this internal motor that if I have more energy to give, I need to give my energy to the people around me.
Well, and just having that mentality of you're not going to let anybody else outwork you no matter what.
No.
I mean, and you see the elite athletes and that's what it takes, you know? And so that's where
you almost have to have a little bit of a screw loose, you know, like you can't stop.
Right. So we'll go back to your career a little bit more here. And just tell me some of the different positions. You don't have to talk about all the different things you've covered because I know that we could be here all day probably because you do so much, but just the different positions that you've done from, you know, producing to on-air stuff to the, you know, to the recorded media, all that stuff.
Yeah. So let's see. I have worked, to do it quickly, a lot of volleyball, basketball now, which is really fun. Just started doing robotics competitions, which is amazing. Whole different area. I've covered college football, pretty much every volleyball thing you can imagine, indoor or beach. And I started with the writing. You know, that was in college. I spent a lot of time doing the journalistic side of things. And now it's, you know, I've had such a passion to tell stories that production is always in my brain, producing content. And it's something I'm chasing after very aggressively. I think the first 5-6 years of this job, you're just trying to make it, like get somewhere, get on air, get experience. And then all of a sudden you kind of start to feel a little bit, by no means comfortable, but more confident. And now it's, how can I chase after what I really see myself doing? So instead of just getting the experience, it's like, I want to tell this story. Well, how can I find that story? How can I connect with that person? Where's the funding? Where's it going to live? And I love the chase of all of it. It is absolutely daunting and terrifying, and it can be for sure. And I'm sure I'm speaking to the masses when I say these things that are in sports and video production especially. But there's going to be 1,000 doors slammed in your face. And then all of a sudden you're going to get one. And it's going to be majestic and it's going to be magical and it's going to be challenging. But all of a sudden you have this great piece of content that like you got to be a part of, you got to help tell. And you live for that one moment. It's almost like that great golf swing. You know, you might have some like 30 crappy swings and all of a sudden there's just that one that just flows and it just barely scratches the surface. It's beautiful. You feel it. It's on the green. You
shot a 110, but you put that one on the green on the par 3 that just felt amazing, and that's all you walk away remembering. That's you just described my golf game right there.
Exactly. So I think it's, you know, it's I'm chasing those kind of things now, which is really fun. I think I'm always going to be trying to level up, like we all are in this industry. You know, how can we reach more people, or how can we be better at our jobs? You know, that comes in so many different ways. But yeah, so I think I'm kind of going the full scope. And even as a broadcast journalist, like I just finished up an event where I had to do a lot of producing myself. And, you know, creating my own rundown and going through the show format and making sure, you know, how can we best serve our audience and kind of keep things secret so it's more exciting for them? And when do we release this information? And then what is the show? So you're doing, you know, all aspects of broadcast, really, whether you're producing, directing, or on-air talent. I'm sorry to tell you, but there's no way, like there's no plushy job. You just get to sit back and kind of be like, oh, I'm just on air.
Right.
Like you will be producing content or directing content. Like there's no way around it, because especially now in today's sports environment, like you have to be able to do it all. So that, and it makes getting a job a heck of a lot easier. And it makes, when you get that job, that you are best prepared to do that job.
Right.
Because so many times you're going to walk into environments that you may never have worked with somebody in that environment before. You have no idea what to expect, and you just got to go for it. You got to figure it out on your own. And the broader your knowledge base is on everything in sports video, the easier your job becomes, because you can relate to different things. Or if there needs to be a fill in here, or you can pick up the slack in a different area. And I think that's huge, especially in the sports environment right now. You got to be able to do it all.
Yeah, I mean, I have a ton of different things that I want to go into there that you just said, but I want to start out kind of going back to, you know, the dedication stuff that you've put into things. What do you have a most meaningful piece of media that you've created? It doesn't have to be the most successful, or just the most meaningful to you, and why?
Gosh, that's another good question. You know, I think I haven't gotten to produce as much as I would like to, in the sense of like my own content that's Camryn Irwin branded. But I think I've been put in moments in broadcasting that have been really memorable. So the first one that pops into mind, I love kids. And so like this last year, we have one of our AVP pros, so our beach volleyball pros, is a dad. He's got 4 kids, and his littlest daughter, or now actually there's one younger than her, so second youngest, is just this like ball of life, energy, joy, this adorable little blonde thing bopping around the beach, cheering for her dad, dancing every time the music turns on at a tournament. And so we were like, this girl needs to be in broadcasting. Like she's just so social. She loves people. She loves talking to people. You put a mic in her hand and she's just talking. And so we brought her up to the booth, and it was incredible because we do these huge introductions for our AVP pros before they play. And so she got to introduce her dad, which was like on the loudspeaker in front of everybody. I mean, I was ready to cry. Like it was the cutest thing ever. And then we brought her into the booth as well. And so she sat with me and got to call. And she's, I think, gosh, is she 6? She might be 5 or 6. And so she got to help call her dad's match. And so, you know, just sitting there getting to interact with this beautiful young soul, and like how proud and joyful she was to like watch her dad and just cheering over and over again. That one. So it's Casey Patterson's, her father. And just one of the coolest moments. And then I think one of the other ones is, again, it's all about like family. You know, I got to work some Facebook football games when they first started a few years back, I think in 2017. And it's this crazy environment where I am actually responding and reacting as a sideline to a live feed on Facebook. So I'm on the sideline and I can see people tuning in. And they're writing me comments. I'll give shout outs. Hey, if you're from the class of 78 from Wyoming, like who's here?
So this was Pac-12.
No, this is Facebook. So it was actually with Stadium Sports and Facebook.
But like who was the
it's live on Facebook.
But like what games was it?
Oh, it was Wyoming versus Texas State.
Okay.
Yeah. I think was the game.
So those were like the Stadium was the channel, right?
Stadium was a channel on Facebook Live.
Got it. Okay.
And you know, this is the first year they're really starting to do this. They're trying to figure out how it's going to function. There were a lot of question marks, just like any broadcast. And so I just kept getting in my ear. I had a social producer who's saying, hey, we keep getting this hashtag interview cheerleader Sydney. I have no idea what team she's on or like with. I'm like, I have no idea why I'm interviewing her, but I'm like, okay, I got to find Sydney somewhere. Everyone's talking about it on social, can't figure out why. So I go up to her, or I go up to the Wyoming sideline and I say, did you have a cheerleader named Sydney? And they're like, well, yeah. I go, I'm from Facebook and Stadium Sports. Can I talk with her? I need to interview her. And they're like, well, sure. And I'm like, okay. So I go I'm walking blindly into this interview and I'm like, I'm just going to ask, like, what questions do you ask?
Right.
You have no context.
Yeah.
And so I just start going, I'm from Facebook and everyone's telling me I need to interview you. Like, what's going on in your life? Why'd you choose Wyoming as your university? What do you love about Wyoming? Like, just kind of I'm trying to
figure out
to dig and figure out why, And she's just this super sweet girl. And she was so kind. And she's, in her mind, she's doing the same thing. Like, why do they want to talk to me? I can see her trying to figure it out. And so all of a sudden, interview finishes up. No idea. I was like, well, thanks so much for your time. So I walk away and I hear up in the booth, they must have got some different information, my play-by-play analyst. And they say something about her dad. And so I'm like, okay, I need to go back and talk to her. I have no clue why, again, except for something about her dad. And so I walk back over and I say, Sydney, I think your dad's been the one asking for this interview. And immediate, tears, sobbing. I still, again, no context. And I'm like, well, where is he?
Right.
Oh, he's in Germany, where he's stationed.
Oh, wow.
So she hasn't seen her dad for this extended period of time. His name was Scott Ward. He's now back home, and it's been this incredible story. And I got to be just a very small glimpse, but she hadn't gotten to see her dad, or it was this huge recognition. And she just starts to cry, and I get to give her a big hug and just say, what would you like to say to your dad? He's tuning in from Germany.
Right.
That's the beautiful thing about where the sports industry is heading now, especially with all these streaming services. It's like, you can get content from anywhere. And so this beautiful moment that could have not happened anywhere else, real time, I got to be a part of and got to have this amazing moment created for this special family, the Ward family. I'm still friends with the mom and dad on Facebook right now, found them. They were so sweet and so kind. So that was a really fun experience. And again, all of my big memories are from just getting to be with really great people and getting to be a very small piece of sharing their story, which is really cool.
So you talk about memorable stories.
Yeah.
I understand you've got a memorable moment with Steve Nash.
Yes. Yeah. So, as so many people know, Steve Nash is a fan of several other sports besides basketball. And that's another really cool moment is he actually married a volleyball player. And so he lives in either Manhattan or Hermosa, but he is very submerged within the volleyball community now. And so he was actually out at one of our last events for the AVP tour. And we were like, would you mind hopping on broadcast with us? So I got to have Steve Nash as my analyst as I'm calling play-by-play. And of course, I'm nerding out as a basketball fan. And I cannot tell you how much he knows about the game. It's
really
incredible. Everyone knows he loves soccer or football, but oh my goodness, this man, to see how his mind works as an overall athlete, how he sees bodies move, and how he can even pick out strategies without having 20 years of background in the sport was incredible. So that was one of the that's more of a cool fangirl moment. I try and not do the fangirl, but that one was.
That's part of the benefits of the profession that, you put in all the hard labor hours and you get to have those moments sometimes. So you should take advantage of them and enjoy them.
I think there are pictures of me and, again, Steve is very much a part of the beach volleyball community. So a lot of people have gotten to interact with him in that community. But for me, I'm beaming, I'm talking to him and all I want to talk about is basketball and all he wants to talk about is volleyball. So I'm I'm calling play-by-2. So I'm trying to call the match and ask him about what he knows. And it was a fangirl moment for sure. Sorry, Steve.
All right. So from volleyball to football, basketball, robotics, you've called and covered a lot of different things. How do you approach some of these sports and events that you might not be necessarily as familiar with?
Know a lot about. Yeah. Gosh, I think it's the challenge of it all. As much as I call volleyball, I love calling volleyball because it was mine. Like, it was my sport.
Right.
And I obviously know I have a lot of background in it. But one of my favorite things is to call things I haven't called before, because again, it's the challenge. It's the competitor within me. When somebody says, like, you don't know football, you don't know basketball, like, you didn't play, and I'm going, I'll show you.
Yeah.
Take me on. I will show you. And I think that's what helps me kind of go after some of these events, even with robotics. Like, I don't have a background in science beyond, my college education. I spent over a month and a half, 7-8 hours a day, deep diving into how does LiDAR work? What's an RGB depth camera? How does that function with reflective surfaces? What's a UGV? What's a UAV? How do these robots communicate in difficult surroundings or situations? So these are all robotics terms, and I just went full bore. Like, it's almost like you're studying for a law degree, but in any sort of event I cover. Now, the challenge with that is you go deep dive. I am kind of dead to the world besides like my little inner circle. And then you re-submerge and you're like, what's happened for the last month and a half? And everyone expects you to be like up to date on football or up to date on basketball. Like, no, you don't understand. When you cover events, you're all in. Like, it's hard to kind of keep your base everywhere. So you just resurface and then you study for the next thing or the next 3 things maybe for a 3-month period, and then you just kind of move seasonally, I guess, is how it works.
I want to find out more about this robotics event that you've mentioned here a few times. But what spurred you to take that? I mean, do you have an interest in robotics, or I do now. Did they just reach out to you and say, hey, I mean, how did that come about?
So I worked an event called the Subterranean Challenge that is put on by DARPA, which is kind of the research agency for the Department of Defense. So within, I guess, the Pentagon, and they're responsible for the internet and Siri and so many different technological advances throughout the world. And so one of my friends had called an event previously for them, and he was unable to, do this one. And so I got the phone call passed off to me, and I was like, well, sure, why not? I'll figure it out. And it was kind of that same concept of when somebody says you can't do something, dare me.
Yeah.
So I said, you know what? I have very little background on this, but I will figure it out and I will do my best. I'm going to tell the human stories, because no matter what, even though this is a robotics competition, the humans control the robots. So there's still a lot of human elements with this. I'm just going to put on my learning hat. I'm going to arm myself with curiosity, which I think is the greatest trait of a broadcaster, just asking questions and being genuinely curious. And so I went and I called a solo broadcast, which means it's just you. Yeah. You're not talking to anybody else. And it was about 6 hours a day live, 10 different teams from all over the world. So then there's also some minor language, differences. Right. So when you're interviewing people, you're trying to figure out exactly like what are they comfortable about? What are they comfortable talking about?
What kind of stuff did you talk about? I mean, I'm curious.
You'd be surprised. So a lot of it is still like the human element. Right. Everything we do, it's all about people.
Yeah.
And so a lot of them, I learned about like, how do you get robotic systems that weigh 450 pounds from the Czech Republic to the US? Yeah. How do you do it?
Right.
One of our teams they're from Singapore, and they got some of their smaller systems stuck in customs in Tennessee. They couldn't get them to the competition. So it's a lot of those type of things where I talked about that a lot. And then it's a lot of, well, how did your systems perform? How did they function? What went right? What went wrong? And then trying to figure out the follow-up. And a lot of times I don't know, I had enough of a background by the time I went in, the follow-ups kind of merged together.
Is it like play-by-play of like battle bots where they're like fighting to destroy each other? Because that's a little bit of what I'm picturing. Or is it like robots playing soccer against each other? Or are there like a set of challenges that they have to complete? I mean, how did it?
So it's really cool. It's, and again, the competition's a 3-part or trilogy of different like areas. And then there's a main event that takes place.
Okay.
So there's obviously some information I can't necessarily share, but how this last one functioned, because it's all online, you can go find it, there were 2 different courses in an unfinished nuclear power plant about 30 minutes outside of Olympia, Washington, in a small town called Elma. So they have to traverse through these courses and find specific objects. Now, these objects were they call them smart dummy mannequins. So it's a mannequin that actually sends off a thermal signature like someone's body temperature would. It can talk, so it gives auditory cues. There's cell phones they have to find, backpacks they had to find, and then they had to find a vent or like gas, CO2 being emitted from a device.
These are very real world applications that they're putting these things through.
That's exactly what it's for. So the whole basis of the competition is to find or build autonomous systems that can go through these underground environments to help warfighters and first responders.
Okay.
And so through all of this, they send their robots into these courses. The teams have no clue what the obstacle course looks like. And mind you, it looks like a horror film down there. Like in this turbine building underneath, you see the images and you're like, abandoned cars that have been set on fire and like caution tape that is used as wallpaper.
I mean, I'm just picturing Chernobyl, basically.
No, it's I mean, it is nuts, absolutely nuts. They use it now for like filming of movies, and I think one of the Transformers movies had been filmed there as well. And so they send off these robots into these courses, and you're sitting there watching. Like, I only see what's on our live stream, like our cameras.
Right. So that's what I want to go into that next, but keep going.
So it's hard because you see things happening. Like, I have multiple camera views, but I have to keep the integrity of the competition intact because all of the robots are pretty much mapping the underground environment. So they're building this map, this 3D image, and each team kind of builds their own over the course of 4 different scored runs. Sorry, you're getting deep into the competition now. So they kind of figure out exactly what they think is going on down there, and then they just like send their robots out, and you're sitting there screaming in the back room because you see them traversing stairs. Like this robot that looks like a dog called Spot from Boston Dynamics and JPL, and you're like, oh my gosh, that thing just went down the stairs on its own, like walk down just like a dog would. Wow. And you're like, these are the amount of money that goes into these. It's just nuts. And I equate it to like you rear a child for 2 or 3 years, and then you say, okay, honey, like go make your way through this obstacle course, like don't die. And so you're just sitting there watching, and it is as exciting as I am projecting right now. That is true. I didn't know how big of a robotics fan I was going to become until I called this event, and now I'm just like, I'm all in.
So this is a pretty big scale broadcast then. I mean, lots of cameras, lots of crew.
Yeah, my crew was fantastic. Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, it was, again, just like a lot of sporting events are now. It was streamed live through YouTube on DARPA's channel. So if you want to go check it out, it's on there. It's called the Subterranean Challenge. And we had a full crew. So, I mean, I've got production. I have my director who's in my ear. Got it. I'm not calling play-by-play, but I'm giving live updates throughout each scored run. Right. So, 3 or 4 each time, giving wrap-ups, doing interviews with everybody after they come off the course, setting up the next one, going through the leaderboard. I mean, I'm hosting the whole thing. So it encompasses play-by-play, analysis, sidelining, and hosting. Again, the more you can do, the easier your job becomes. Or I guess challenging, depends on how you view it. And so, I kind of called every aspect of it. The staff from DARPA was phenomenal. Like, I cannot speak highly enough about the people I got to work with. They were so kind to me. They educated me around every corner. They answered every single one of my probably really stupid questions to them. They're all like geniuses, in the world of robotics and software design and all this stuff. But they were so kind to me and so welcoming. And same thing for my production crew. Like, you're balancing these different worlds of, this competition and the integrity of it and the genius behind it all, and then you're trying to figure out how can we best display this. I mean, it's still, there's elements of secrecy because the course design no one knows. Right, and you're live, so they could essentially be watching. So exactly. So certain cameras, a lot of cameras are blocked off. You're only getting certain views, like within the course, and so there's some knowledge down there, but to be able to like see different things and not project anything that I shouldn't know, or like the audience shouldn't know. And so that was a big element too. I just kept telling people on my production staff as well as DARPA, I'm like, you guys don't tell me anything I can't say on air. Like, just don't, because they're this is their love, their joy. They want me to know all these things. And I'm like, nope. So and then I got this huge debriefing afterwards of like, competition's done. Now we can tell you about stuff. And I'm like, thank you, but nothing that I could kind of minorly slip up on, which I protected myself. We're good. I didn't screw up.
Interesting experience for
Oh,
sure.
yes. It was a whole new thing.
Great. So I want to talk to you about working with different members of whether it be broadcast or video that you're producing, documentary style, anything like that.
Yeah.
And I guess we'll start, since it seems like you do, or at least recently have been doing more on-air, play-by-play or color for games, whether it be football, volleyball, basketball,
even now.
all that stuff. So what are some things that directors can do to make your job easier? Directors specifically.
Yeah, directors. Oh man. That's a great question too. By the way, that's one of the best compliments you can give a broadcaster, is to say, that's a great question. Just
well,
so you know. Gosh, I think I've said it probably 16 times in this interview, but this industry is all about people. Mm-hmm. And you're in the sports world. You have to know how to work as a team. Right. And that requires a lot of things. It requires leadership. It requires a heck of a lot of accountability. It requires a lot of communication. And within that communication, a lot of criticism, both directions. And it's critical, but you're not going to get better at a sport unless you are genuinely taking a look at your job and the person next to you. If you're on the same team, obviously working towards the same goal, figuring out how can we better serve one another. So I think that's a huge conversation that should be had that I don't think is necessarily opened up enough, probably in the sports production world. Mm-hmm. Just sitting down and being like, how can I better serve you and how can you better serve me? And so I think it goes both ways. I think director to probably talent, it's different because directors have different roles in different areas.
But okay, for AVP, we'll use that as an example. Are there any directors that you work with that you don't have to, and you don't have to say names or anything like that, but just that you feel like you work better with or like working with more? And what are some traits that you think that makes it that way?
I think, so I'm going to combine production and producers and directors because in the broadcast world, sometimes the director has a lot more to do with you and sometimes the producer has a lot more to do with you. So I'm just going to talk about who's in my ear and who's on my team. I need them to know, not necessarily, they will never know as much as I know in terms of whether if I'm an analyst on a volleyball event, just because they didn't play volleyball for 25 years. Right. So I don't expect them to ever know as much as I do, but I do expect them to know enough that if they had to talk to somebody, or if I asked them to talk to an athlete or a different person on staff, that they were educated enough to have a real conversation to be able to relay information to me if I'm live. I think that's a huge aspect. I think understanding the game they're calling, having not just a basic knowledge of it, but a better understanding to be able to say, like, this graphic makes no sense. Why are like the stat is not relevant to what we're talking about. Now, a lot of this can be solved by a broadcast journalist, a play-by-play or analyst, doing the legwork before they go to the event. I mean, the great thing when an event goes right, it's because of everything you've done for the past 6 months. It's not what you're doing on site. I mean, there's elements of that, but everything that happens on site is because of the work you put in beforehand. So I think for producers, directors, broadcasters, can you put in enough research, enough man hours, enough communication with one another to make sure you do the broadcast justice? Okay. Not just doing the general, like, let's get through it. Let's talk about percentages. Let's talk about this. It's like, no, why do we need to talk about percentages with this specific team? So I want the people who do their homework. Like, the more you know, and maybe you give me a nugget that I don't have. If you surprise me with something, oh my gosh, it's like, I'm sitting there trying to think of things to say because I've got to talk with volleyball for 10 hours. I'm saying the same things over and over. Like, there's only so much you can talk about for 3 days, And so if my producer says, hey, I did a little bit of research. It turns out that they lost third round of our previous tournament. And it's like, I may even have that nugget, but it's maybe 10 pages deep in my research.
Or so not on the top of your mind.
Not
so
on the
little help, nudge, anything like that.
Anything new, fresh. So I think for producers, directors, just do your homework and communicate. Like, spend the time beforehand with your team And there are broadcasters and producer and directors that all of us will fall short at different moments. It's life. There's families, there's children, there's travel, there's other events. But even still saying, hey guys, I just called 3 events this week. I'm feeling a little behind. Can you work with me here? Can you have that conversation? Can you be whatever, man enough or female enough to have that conversation, be genuine and have open lines of communication? And I think that's one area I think some frustration takes place. Now, I have been very fortunate. I have to say this. I've been very, very fortunate. My production crew with Amazon and AVP is phenomenal. These guys live and breathe volleyball. They call college and indoor across the world. I am very, very lucky. And so many of my other production staffs have been just like that really have done their homework. It's just that 1 or 2 times where you're like, oh man, it's not that it went bad. It's just, we could do better. That's an area we could have improved upon. And then I'm trying to think if there's anything else that in terms of, I want to be surprised. Okay. That's a big element. And I don't want you to, now there's certain elements I want you to show me beforehand. Like I think of football or like a great package that maybe comes up but I'm like, save the visuals. If there's some like little, if it's a graphic, maybe I see it, maybe I don't. But if there's a video or like, I would genuinely want to be surprised. Like,
so that your reaction is genuine. When
exactly.
It comes back to you.
Exactly.
Okay.
Because I want to be just as surprised as anybody sitting at home. So I can kind of display that to them.
Okay. Interesting.
But
that's good to know.
New innovative things, also great.
Yeah.
I feel like we kind of get to the status quo, just like any job. This is how it's been done. So this is what works. And there is some of that too. It's always a balance of what works and kind of pushing the boundaries. But, I'm always going to be the type to say like, well, why can't we do this?
Right.
Why can't we do this interview?
Trying
Why
new
can't
stuff,
we
making it fresh?
Yeah, make it fresh, make it different. Especially with like linear networks now, you're sitting here going, all these linear networks are now competing with all these streaming services that have so much more freedom. Right. And it's like, well, why can't we do some of these things that are happening in streaming? Because I work in both landscapes. Right. Significantly in both landscapes. And it's like, well, why can't we bring some of these social elements and pull them into the linear network even more frequently? Why can't we show tweets? Why can't we respond to things that we see on social? It's the same thing. You can go on Twitter and you can have a social producer sitting next to you in a commercial break or a game break and say, hey, here's a list of 6 tweets and let's figure out how we can incorporate them. Right. Here are some questions we found on Twitter. Like, why can't we bring that to the linear networks? Yeah. And it's a balance, like all things. And it's a slow process. I have a feeling it's going to get even more like that as we continue. But just innovative things, innovative ideas are always fun too.
What about when you're producing a package that's taped, you're recording interviews, almost like a E60 style produced package? Let's start with camera operators. I mean, you have a story that you're, as a reporter, producer, I feel like that's kind of the role that you find yourself in with those. Yeah. How do you convey to camera operators? And then I guess what you want. What do you want to see from camera operators to tell them to work with you?
Well, I think the number one thing every broadcaster needs to remind themselves of is that it's never about them. Unless the story is actually their story. It should never be about you. So I think one of the conversations I always have is like, do I need to be in the shot or do I not need to be in the shot? Like, how relative is that? Is it for me to actually be there or not be there? Not be scared to take yourself out of it. And also not scared to put yourself into it. So, I think before you do any sort of a shoot or piece, how much of an element are you really in it? Am I going to be on camera or not? And then beyond that, obviously the more cameras, the better sometimes. Most of the time, because you can catch just about every angle. Yeah. But how can you do the most with as few cameras? I think that's the question that we all always face. Right. So just making sure you've got eyes on everything. And kind of zoning in and staying focused. A lot of times we'll start to see other aspects or different areas, and maybe you shift or branch off into a different subject that maybe interacts with your main singular focus. So kind of dealing with some of those elements, but I also love photography. So I think I love portrait photography in specific and real world applications too. So like I want to take your portrait here where you're working and doing what you love and all of that. So for me, I look at it just the same way as if I'd be taking someone's portrait. I want to show them doing what they love, because most of the time that's their truest self. Like in those emotional settings, in the environments that they love or they hate, but whatever makes them emote, right? And so I think for camera operators, a lot of time we follow so much action, but some of the best shots are away from the ball. And especially in like a documentary style piece. Now the game is a huge piece of it, but everybody else is watching the game. You're going to get that camera angle somewhere else, or you're going to be able to find that footage somewhere else. You may have to fight for the rights for it, but like everyone's focus is there. Where can you find stories on the sidelines, or maybe behind the scenes, or in places cameras haven't been? Because to me, those are the stories that like, that's what sets the things up that happen in the games. So kind of singularizing your focus to things that maybe aren't exactly on the field.
And then I'll kind of phrase it the same way I did the other one, but like, are there any camera operators that you've worked with or produced packages with in the past that you thought were particularly better, or, you know, you like working with more? And what traits do you think that they had that made it that way?
I think people who understand, so camera operators that understand sports and understand people in a sense of, you know, they're social, a lot of them. Because they know when to look into a box or a timeout, or what are they looking at in that timeout? There's also the element of like, you have to give certain space, knowing when to approach someone and knowing when to take a step back so that you can get certain moments in the future. I think so often, especially in today's sporting world, it's like, we have to get this shot now. But if you're there with 7 or 10 or 15 other cameras, everybody's getting that shot. So it's the same thing. Can you find a camera operator that knows when to be in those environments or to look elsewhere, knows when to be respectful to the athlete, which is a challenge, but still get their job done. So I think it's somebody that constantly looks for the emotion in sport and the emotion behind sport and people that makes for a great camera operator. And I've worked with a lot of them. My goodness, there's too many to name. You know, there are those that are stuck on their single shot of, you know, the field, and, you know, especially in production, you know, the number of cameras I feels like at certain games continues to decrease just because we are always trying to figure out ways to do things better, but also yet
more efficiently,
more cost effective.
Yeah, cost effective. Yeah.
And so you also have, I think this is a great conversation too. You have a camera. I have a camera.
Right.
It's in our cell phone. So now it's like, can we produce something on our iPhone and put it on air?
Right.
Yes, I've done that multiple times. Like even with ESPN, it's like, can we film a strategy or analysis segment before this game ever happens? And we've literally shot it on our iPhone. Audio's great, visuals are great, it goes on air, and it's epic. It's this amazing segment of, you know, this different analysis or package piece. So I think, again, it's just finding ways to innovate, be creative, look for things that haven't been done.
Right.
Look for emotions and places and people that aren't typically seen, which is the stuff that's really cool to me.
Yeah. So one of the favorite pieces of advice that I've heard is the best camera you have is the one that's with you.
Yep.
So the last position that I want to kind of take that route down is an editor for said produced package or anything like that. Because, you know, I know you know how to edit, but a lot of the times you're working with a professional editor to put together these pieces. You know, who are some of the, you know, you don't have to say who they are, but like think of the good ones that you've worked with and what do you think makes them good, I guess, to work with.
Yeah. The ones that question you.
Okay.
I think, again, everything is a balance, but I get so caught up, just like a lot of producers or storytellers, we get so caught up in this vision we have, but you got to freaking humble yourself. Take a step back. And if you have just a yes man sitting next to you, you're only going to see this from one view. And it's your view. You want to know, how is this going to connect with everybody else that's viewing this piece? And you've got this great team behind you that's seeing every inch of every piece of video, of every interview. Their opinion is more important sometimes than yours. Knowing, hey, they've got this great look, or this is how they want to see this story, or this is what resonates with them, because they're like your viewing audience. So taking into account, you've got, again, same with directors, producers, editors. If they see something that's great and they have an idea, listen and understand, like, maybe it's not what you envisioned, but that's because it's better than what you could have envisioned. So understanding you don't always have all the answers.
Well, and part of the ability of an editor to do that is having the knowledge of the topic and the subject and the thing.
All of these are combined into one.
Exactly.
For sure.
Yeah, no, that's a big part of it. I mean, you're putting in all this time in research. So if the other people that you're working with can have, that same information and knowledge that you have, that just makes the product that much better.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, the background is significant. I think from producer, director, editor, even the audio guy. You're like, what sound are you catching? What not sound? Are we getting in huddles? Are we not getting in huddles? Knowing when to put something, like, I love Hard Knocks. It's this incredible thing, right? Everyone loves Hard Knocks, but it's because it's free form. It's everything's out there. But at the same time, like, there is still stuff that gets edited. Yeah. And so, you have to manage relationships. You have to manage your relationship with the team, with the staff, with the athlete, and understand sometimes it's not always just about getting the one thing that no one else has to the point of ruining a relationship. There's nothing worse in this industry. You do not want to hurt any of those relationships because they all come back around. Yeah. They all come back around.
All right, and we'll kind of start to wind down here, and I want to go through a few general questions that just kind of I try to hit most people with. But what are some ways that you get better every day and progress in your career?
Saying yes, saying I will try it, I will do it, and facing the fear of failure every day. So I think, accepting jobs that you're even sitting there going, okay, like, I guess I'll figure it out. Great example, when I started working for Amazon Prime, and covering professional beach volleyball, the night before I hadn't called play-by-play. And we're all sitting there the night before in Austin, Texas, in this like mobile park thing. And, AVP walks in, don't screw up, Camryn, this is our brand. Amazon walks up, hey, don't screw up, this is our brand. And you're like, okay, this is Amazon. Amazing people, by the way. But you're sitting there like, okay. And then they go, and also you're calling play-by-play. And you're going, okay, I haven't called play-by-play. And this is their first worldwide live event, sporting event they've ever streamed or covered.
For Amazon or the
For
AVP?
Amazon.
Oh, wow.
You're like, oh, yeah, I got this.
So how much sleep did you get that night?
None.
Yeah.
None. And those are 10-hour broadcast days. And I fumbled. I mean, thank the Lord that Amazon let me learn and get better. And same thing with AVP brand. I mean, over the course of 2 years, all of a sudden I'm like, freaking play-by-play.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't even know that was something I was really interested in. All of a sudden you were thrust in this position of, okay, I'll figure it out. Here we go. And I've had these amazing experiences. Overall, as a broadcaster, being a play-by-play is probably one of the hardest jobs in all of broadcasting. I think a lot of people will even say that. And so now it's like, it makes hosting easier. It makes being an analyst easier. It makes being a sideline easier. And so, just say yes to the things that scare the living heck out of you and figure it out as you go. Let's see. What else was there?
I want to know what resources you use, like specific resources, whether it's blogs or websites or YouTube channels.
Read as much as you can. So, well,
are there specific
thanks to
news
Max
outlets?
here, you actually taught me about Google Alerts. So I have Google Alerted NBA Summer League and NBA this. So I go through, I try to, it doesn't happen every morning by any means. Like once a week, you kind of got to go through what's the big storylines, kind of in each landscape. If you're in a specific event or a specific season, you spend more time with that. So even like this last week, I'm gearing up for volleyball season. I want to know more about the way Jake Gibb plays. So I'm watching film on Jake Gibb from 2017. So I watch YouTube, a lot of YouTube. I went into the deep dive of robotics YouTube for the last month and a half. Gosh, there's some real interesting stuff down there. And I am a big, everyone calls me Leslie Knope in this industry. I am a note taker. I am a researcher. And I do have binders.
I can see it. I can totally see it. That's why I'm laughing.
I should pull up. I actually brought I use an iPad Pro, which is fantastic. If I have broadcasters out there The iPad Pro is fantastic, the new one with the pencil, because I can go, everything's digital, but I can still handwrite when I'm in an interview, which is fantastic. I build all of my boards. So if you're unfamiliar with what a board is, when you're calling play-by-play or analysis, you create boards where you have information on each athlete. And it kind of just building the board, you don't really ever, you print them out and you have them in front of you, but building them is what gets the information in
Is
your
there
head.
a specific app you use for that, or?
Every broadcaster has a different system.
Okay.
I pull from the people that are closest to me, but at the same time, I've found, my AVP boards have shifted every single year, because once you're in it, you realize what you need and what you actually don't need. And so I should show you. From college beach volleyball, a lot of it will start off, you've got your name, where they're from. I always like one of my fun things is, which I learned from my co-host, I look at their high school and I'm like, ooh, what's their high school mascot? Is it weird? Is it a fun nugget I can pull over to the broadcast? So a lot of times, I've got the mascots, the school colors, where they're from, their height, their position. And then it's information on their background as a person. Maybe they were a scholar athlete, or maybe they were an All-American. And then you have, I don't care if it's a sport I've never covered, or a sport I've never played, or the position or role I'm in. If I'm play-by-play analyst or sideline, I want to know, because I'm an athlete, how that person moves and functions. I want to know the analysis behind the game, regardless of my role. Now, that is pretty unique to me, just because I think as an athlete, I want to know, how can a team win even if they're the underdog? And so I spend a lot of time watching film. I watch a lot of film, football, basketball. I watch educational videos. If I don't understand, different techniques, different offensive systems, I read everything you could possibly imagine from, I keep on hand, football, basketball for dummies, because a lot of them are updated. So you get the updated rules, or things that you don't even, even in volleyball, the rules change every year, and you may not, I've been in it for 25 years and I'm still surprised by something, so you kind of just keep these encyclopedias with you whenever you need to look something up, or maybe you don't understand exactly the inches or the difference of the key, or, there's so many things. So
are there any specific publications that you subscribe to, or that you find in your,
I think you have to have a broad scope,
right?
Just because I feel like a lot of times if you get so sucked into something, there's so many different ways. And I know you're looking for something for people to look to.
No, I mean, I'm just trying to figure out, I'm trying to pick your brain on these little hacks and the things that you use. And I mean, apart from learning the specific game, but just growing yourself as a reporter or on air. I mean, are there any publications or podcasts or anything like that you listen to?
I have a good one.
There we go.
Okay.
This
is a little hack that's great for sidelining or any sort of analysis. So if you're covering an event, maybe in a conference you're not used to covering. So I work Pac-12. All of a sudden I'm starting to call SEC games. And I'm going, I didn't play in the SEC. I didn't ever live over there. I got to figure out everything I need to know. Your local beat reporters need to be your best friends.
Okay.
I can't tell you how many times I connect with beat reporters on Twitter. They usually have great stories. A lot of times they'll have video from previous games that maybe there's a cool story. This is one, it happened in Colorado. Colorado, they had this huge upset over Nebraska. And there was this, they rushed the field. There's this great video, and one of the beat reporters took of one of the athletes, signing a kid's jersey and handing him his gloves. And it's this amazing moment. And so it was I found it on his Twitter, and I politely just said, hey, would you mind if we showed this on air? Now, it didn't actually end up making air. It was too much of an intense game. The next game I covered, which was Air Force in Colorado. And so we weren't able to slip it in, but I had that story based off of one of the beat reporters, and he was kind enough to be like, yeah, it'd be epic if you could put this on air. So beat reporters are your best friend. Watching the former broadcasts, oh gosh, if you can find a way to contact somebody, because there are a lot of storylines that are the overarching storylines for a team. That's what's going to get talked about in the broadcast prior to. So that's one of my little hacks too, is if I'm covering a team that I have not covered before and I just need a general scope to start with, and then I can start digging in on other things, I'll ask the network for their previous broadcast, and then I can learn from what those broadcasters already know, And it also makes it so maybe I don't have to tell those stories because
Right.
everybody just heard them.
Telling the same ones. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's another hack. What else is there? I mean, honestly, I know it sounds silly. The iPad Pro, I talk to so many broadcasters. You can do your boards digitally and you can put them side by side. So one of the big challenges of being on site is papers. You don't think it's that big of a deal, but when you're outside, it's raining or windy, and you're trying to hold on to things and take notes, it's a problem. So I think that's really nice too. I still print just because I'm old school in that sense, but having that and being able to diminish when you're on the road for 2 weeks straight, you don't have to hold on to everything, and everything is saved for the next year. I think a lot of broadcasters have file cabinets from 30 years ago of the calls they've done, and they'll dig back through to find old storylines. And this way, it's like it's all in
Digital.
the cloud.
Yep.
It's all in the cloud, so it makes it really nice.
Cool. Where do you think your position, we'll say as an on-air talent for live broadcast, is going to be different 10 years from now?
Oh man. Well, like us all, we have dreams and hopes. I would love to be producing sports documentaries, or even maybe they're outside of sports, or they have a small tie into sports, but I want to, really be able to tell those stories. Maybe it's not in 60 minutes, maybe it's in 30 minutes, maybe it's in a 15-minute series every day. I don't know what it would look like, but I really want to be able to produce, host content, tell stories, to shape lives. That's where I would like to be, along with still doing live game coverage.
Okay.
There's nothing better than the environment, like being on site at a football game or a volleyball game or basketball game. Just the energy that's there, the storylines that take place, you get to be a part of it all. I will always want to be doing that. Now that requires a lot of travel. And I hope in 10 years, Lord willing, I will have hopefully a family, and that might make it a little more difficult to do all that travel. But maybe I get to be a part in a studio role, or I'm working towards that. But we'll see. Those are things I'd love to do, but maybe it all shifts and changes.
Right.
Maybe I just have my own production crew, and it's me and six guys, and we're just telling stories. Who knows where they'll live or what they'll do, but I don't know. There's a lot. And then I would love to still work. I love coaching. So I will probably be coaching, probably not my kids, but I will probably be coaching in some way or shape or form and working with youth, because that's my second passion.
That's awesome. What's your biggest struggle right now?
Oh my goodness. Just fighting through year 5. I think, and it's so easy. So there's more often than not, the doors are closed. I think you talk to anybody in this industry, it's very rare that you apply for a job and you get the first one. Maybe it's 15 jobs you get turned down for. Maybe it's 5 years of work and you're just continuing to get like the door cracked open and open and open. So I think the biggest thing for me is like, can I bust through those doors? I've been trying to open them for the last 5 years, and it's starting to happen, which is amazing. I'm finally getting to call basketball. Like I got to work with Fox, hosting a game with Dante Jones a month or two ago. And in this new environment, this new type of broadcast. And so things are slowly starting to kind of open up, which is fantastic. But I think I got a no this morning for a job I was really hopeful for. I thought I was a perfect candidate. And all of a sudden, literally, like as we're getting ready to get on air here, I just got a text that said, "Yep, nope, you didn't get it. Sorry." And you just got to keep going. Look to the next thing, make the next connection, fight for the next job, and know that you can do the next job. And when you get it, you better freaking crush it, because sometimes you get one shot. So you got to be prepared every single time you step up to a mic.
Fight through those no's. Just keep
fight through the no's.
So you have you're on air, you're in the public eye, you have a public image. How do people's perceptions of you differ from who you really are?
It's a great question. Again, I try and be as true to myself. I mean, we all know how all encompassing social media is in today's sporting world and just our overall lives. So I try and be as genuine as possible on all of my platforms. To me, I just love people. So anytime I approach any sort of media, I think about the person that's going to be reading it, every person that could be reading it or seeing it, and trying to understand how it might affect them. Empathy is a huge quality that I try and surround myself with and live my life through. So understanding where other people are coming from and how they may view content is a huge part of, I think, how we should all act, whether it's broadcasting or not. And so I think for me, you got to know yourself, and you got to know, like, I'm still evolving. I have, a lot of my quote unquote fan base is a lot of volleyball fans.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I'm calling robotics or I'm calling basketball, and I'm going, well, they're going to think this, like, what are they thinking? Is this something that they're not interested in? Like, does this fit your brand? And so I'm going, but what is your brand? To me, my brand is storytelling and people. Any people. I don't care who it is. I want to tell your story. So if I'm projecting that in every coverage I do, then it doesn't matter what I'm covering. So, and it was super cool. I got to go and play volleyball with some of our pros just a couple of days ago, and they were enthralled by the robotics. And I didn't expect that. I thought they were all just kind of write it off and be like, oh, Camryn's just calling a different event. No, they were genuinely curious. And so I got to sit down for 30 minutes and tell them all about it. And they all of a sudden they're looking it up and want to know more. And so in terms of brand, it's not what you cover, it's how you cover it and who you are. So making sure that is what comes across on whether your social platform or your broadcast.
Yeah.
Am I smiling when I'm doing an interview? Am I respecting the loss or the win that they just had? Am I connecting with the person I'm talking to? That's your brand. And then making sure that's what people see. So I try and do a good job of that. I don't know if I do or not, but maybe in terms of, I know you asked the difference. People, I think it's this life of luxury.
Right.
And I think the people close, even kind of maybe one step removed from me, understand how much work I put in. They see the travel. They see I'm never home. My home is my family, wherever I'm at. I do have a great support system and a great family. So they know me, but it's, you see me right now and I'm my hair's done. I'm wearing a dress. Right. But maybe the other aspect is I live polar opposites at times. I grew up on a farm, high heels. Our idea of high heels is boots in the country and shit kickers. I don't know if you're allowed to call them that, but I'm scooping manure and then all of a sudden I'm in a dress and my makeup's done and I'm wearing fake eyelashes. And it's just two completely contrasting worlds. And so I think the people, and I love both. That's the funny thing. I love fashion and design and all of that. And then I also love just putting on a sundress and walking outside, no makeup, grew up in the Pacific Northwest, just hanging out with friends, relaxing, enjoying family time. I don't need to be in this Hollywood environment. I mean, it's fun at times, but so I think the people that really know me know that about me, that I'm just Camryn and I just love what I do.
Camryn from the farm.
Camryn from the farm. Yep, that's exactly me. No, I think most people assume that I'm from San Diego or California and I grew up in a certain kind of environment.
On the beach playing beach volleyball, probably.
Yes, with a certain background. And then they learn that I'm from Hawkinson, Washington, which I'm so proud of. Consists of a 3-way stop sign and about 1 million amazing people. And I grew up just the youngest of 4 kids, just battling it out, going to soccer practice, going to church on Sundays, and now I live in Manhattan Beach and I talk about football all day. And I think that's probably one of the things people are surprised by, but I don't know why.
So I know you get to do a lot on air, but I don't know if you have the opportunity to do this that often.
No.
But, what I'm getting at is, do you have anybody, shout outs you want to make, people you want to thank that, maybe you don't normally get to be that candid about?
Yeah. Well, I think I just did one, which is where I'm from. A lot of people in this industry have grown up in LA or New York or have a specific background, unless they were kind of an athlete or some. There are a lot that have grown up in this sort of TV production world. And I think what's super cool is that I'm very proud of my rural upbringing. There wasn't like, big network television, and the concept of being somebody that worked on ESPN was like, to them it was a long shot. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, no, it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. But the support every time I get to go home up there, Hawkinson is true and true. And I mean, even outside of Hawkinson, it's called Brush Prairie. So when I tell people this, they're like, wow, it's really, it's really country. So very proud of where I'm from. So shout out to everyone back home. Thanks for all the support, and just always being my home and treating me like Camryn, which is fantastic. And then obviously my family is a huge part of this. My parents have dealt with the amazing phone calls. When I've gotten the job, they've dealt with the numerous frustrations, the doubts, the fears. They've always told me I can do whatever I want to do, always supported me in that, found ways to support me in any possible way they could. My family for understanding I'm not going to make it to every event, but opening up their arms every time I do get to come home. I would say to my friends, the same thing goes. I've had to miss weddings and birthdays, but I think they understand every time I'm there, I'm theirs. And so to those people that are always willing to be by my side, and I guess, Pac-12, that's every company I've worked for giving me a shot. It's anytime you put somebody on live television, it's a question mark. And so for Pac-12 giving me my first live game, which was huge, I will never forget it. Amazon, same thing with, play-by-play. I started working for ESPN more so this last year, which they've been phenomenal. The amount of feedback I've gotten from them, every producer that's challenged me and helped me grow in different ways. My co-hosts that teach me, oh my gosh, so much about this world. Kevin Barnett is one of my dearest and closest friends. Same thing with Dane Blanton. Both of those humans are just outstanding people, amazing fathers, amazing husbands. They're just so fantastic, and they're great broadcasters. Anne-Marie Anderson, Holly McPeak, the list goes on as to like the number. Mikey Am, oh my gosh, Mikey Am, Yogi Roth. It's become such, the people you work with become your family a lot of the times in this. So everybody that I've gotten the chance to ask questions to, Ashley Adamson, Kate Scott, there's so many from Pac-12 that always answer the phone, or if they don't answer the phone, they call me back the next day. And I've got questions. Hey, how would you ask this? How do you handle this situation? What's this person like? What do they not enjoy being asked about? How do you handle agency questions or job questions? Am I doing this right? How can I do this better? So there are the list is extensive, and I cannot thank them enough for their collaboration with me. And I'm sure I'm forgetting so many people, but hopefully I got the shout outs in there. I'm trying to think. Is there anybody else? Oh gosh. Fox? Yeah. They're now too. They gave me a shot. Yeah. But everyone that's also dealt with my craziness and my research and perfectionism, I guess is a good word too. Yeah. Thanks for the patience.
And then where can people find you? Where can people follow you?
Oh gosh. You can find me on social media, which we just talked about, or any broadcast. I cover football for Pac-12 and women's volleyball and men's volleyball, beach volleyball, ESPN. I work there as well. Hopefully some more Fox we'll see in there, and Amazon, obviously. So you can find me at Camryn Irwin. It's a weird spelling.
We'll put in the notes.
I'm the 5'11" blonde, tall female that looks like she's towering over just about every interview subject she has. So, but yeah, and on Twitter too. So, and I'm usually really good about responding on social. So if you have questions or you just want to know more, or for heaven's sake, if you just want to say hello, by all means, stop by. You can drop me a note because I love talking to people, clearly, and I'll stop talking.
No, it's been great. It's awesome. Covered my whole list that I've put together for you. Do you have anything else you'd like to add?
Gosh, no, I'm good. I'm always, anytime I get interviewed, I'm always so embarrassed at the end because I realize how much I talk. So I'm going, oh man, hopefully this is okay. But thanks for the opportunity to, share some of my story and my passions, because obviously if I can't stop talking about them, it's what I really love. So hopefully my story can help those that are interested in sports media and sports production, and hopefully encourage you. I hope none of this scared any of you, because I just told you this is all the best job in the entire world. So just keep going for it. Fight for what you want.
Awesome. Appreciate your time, Camryn.
Okay, thanks.
And there you have it. Some great stuff there from a clearly determined individual. There is no doubt in my mind we will all be seeing Camryn on the sidelines for some of the biggest stages in sports very, very soon. If you'd like to follow Camryn's journey, connect with her on social at Camryn Irwin on Instagram and at CamWin on Twitter. We'll link to her channels in the description. And if you enjoyed this episode, I would be honored if you passed it along to someone you think might like it as well. As we come to an end here, I'd like to say a quick thanks to our sponsors, Hall Pass Media and Sports Business Classroom. And I'd just like to say that I'm especially thankful for you, the listener, for taking the time to tune in today. Have a good one, and I'll see you next time.